and also good for engagement, family, exchanging betrothal gifts, transactions, raising beans, placing beds, buying livestock, and um, like barriers. But it's bad for rituals, asking for blessing, okay, and also breaking ground. So don't break ground today. Yeah, but. So and then if you still would like to sort of buy one of these almanacs, we still have them available for sale, $10. So but really since the introduction of their Pocket Chinese Almanac at MOCA in 2010, so Joanna Lee and Ken Smith have become an integral part of our Lunar New Year traditions. So bringing a unique blend of cultural expertise and insightful foresight. So their annual predictions have turned into a stable for many who seek to navigate the year ahead with wisdom and understanding. So this year, as we immerse ourselves in the year of the wood dragon, we are reminded of the power, strength, and prosperity that the dragon symbolized in Chinese culture. And I just also wanted to take a, kind of a moment to acknowledge actually that on January 23rd, 2020, that was the evening a fire, destroyed the 70 Mulberry, and that's the evening when we hosted the Year of the Rat talk. And then, as we know, the pandemic happened. We were able to salvage our collections, but also in the last few years, for the Almanac talk, it was virtual. So this is the first year we're returning in person. So I think we deserve a round of applause, for what we've been through, what MOCA have been through. So but it's a full cycle. I mean, I really appreciate it. Sort of feels very surreal, right? To be here after, surreal after 4 years, right? Yeah. Hopefully no more fire. Yeah. So, really with Joanna and Ken's guidance, we will explore the practices and preventive measures that our ancestors recommended for living harmoniously. So their work rooted in the century-old traditional almanac, known as Tong Seng in Cantonese and Huang Li in Mandarin, offer us more than just predictions. It serves as a bridge connecting us to a comprehensive repertoire of cultural wisdom, really covering an array of topics from household tips to medical remedies and highlighting favorable and unfavorable days for various activities. So if you are enjoying tonight's program, please check out our website for a full lineup of Lunar New Year activities and programs. Really, we featured a variety of low cost and free programs. We have our MOCA mixers next Thursday, we have our MOCA Lunar New Year Family Festival next Saturday, and then along with other programs. And of course, we also appreciate you consider supporting MOCA. So your generosity is vital to our community and to our institution that helps us create future programs that inspire and uplift diverse communities. So you may donate on our website, and we also accept cash, Venmo, PayPal. There's a QR code at the front, so if you do. And then also, tonight, MOCA will also remain open until 9 p.m. So after the program, please feel free to check out our new exhibition, 5 Senses of Chinatown. So really it's about sort of examination, looking at Chinatown through our multisensory experience. So as we usher in the Year of the Dragon, let us embark on a journey of discovery with Joanna and Ken. So without further ado, I will hand it over to our speaker. So thank you so much for joining us, and Happy Lunar New Year.
First of all, must say thank you, MOCA. Without MOCA, there would never be a Pocket Chinese Almanac. This is what happens with community, with friendships, and with people trusting each other.
Now, when we look at some of the advantages that we look back at, what did we gain from the pandemic? I do have to say that we're coming back speaking in the big hall now. This is our first time in the hall, Neil. We started out in a classroom downstairs. We spoke in the back room, which was also pretty sizable. But now we have the front room, which we have a large crowd, and apparently quite a few people streaming in to see us tonight.
Really, I'm having flashbacks of January 22nd. Can you hear me? Yeah. I'm having flashbacks of January 2020.
2020.
January. Yeah, right. You know, pre-pandemic. Um, that was the night. It was so scary. Um, we had told the audience, and I'm sorry, we are not always the bearer of the best, you know, whatever you call it, projections of the world. But January of 2020, that night, we just all, by 7:45, 8 p.m., were in awe. I mean, we didn't know what to say.
Well, basically, our geomancer, and I should say that we don't make the predictions. We translate the predictions. We annotate. We talk to a man who does this, and a publisher who does this, and we give them, and we sort of explain what goes on, and also how it fits into Hong Kong culture, China culture, and the Chinese diaspora. But our geomancer was kind of freaked out in 2020. And I said, so what, do you have any advice for the year? He said, yes, find a safe place and hide now. And he never really explained. I said, so what do you mean? Is it a man-made disaster? Is it a natural disaster? He says, I don't know. Something will hit and it will affect the entire world. And it will be the same thing affecting the entire world. And so we came in and we gave this talk at MOCA, explaining this, and that was, of course, the night of the fire, as Neil said, and it spiraled downward from there. And certainly some people knew that that a pandemic was on the way, but we found out very soon afterwards. Just a show of hands, though, how many people have been to our talks before? Okay, and the rest of you have never been to an almanac talk? Well, first of all,
Oh,
welcome.
we have to start from scratch.
Yes. We usually have done a PowerPoint and a lot of visuals and show and tell, but we figured, okay, for several years before the pandemic, it turned out to be a lot of the same people coming back, finding what's happening this year, what's happening this year. So so we'll go back and actually talk a little bit about the almanac as a tradition, a little bit about MOCA and how it developed here and how we sort of worked in collaboration with the museum, and then we'll get to the predictions of what the almanac says for next year.
In case you haven't already read about that in the New York Times on January 2nd.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily bode well, but it's not universally bad either. It's just something that we have to be on our toes and sort of be prepared to be prepared, basically, and to be able to roll with the punches. The Chinese Almanac. Now, has anyone grown up with the Chinese Almanac in their home? Okay, we have a couple of hands. We have the actual Chinese Almanac right here. And in here, see a lot of red and black. That is an indication of good and bad activities or things to do per day, sometimes per hour in the year. And that is basically the core of what we do. Now, the history of the almanac actually is very connected to the imperial calendar. The actual setting, the determination of what the year will be, divided like all calendars, basically, taking the sun, moon, and stars, the interactions of the heavenly bodies, and breaking them down into the year of 365-ish days into months, days, year, and weeks. And what is different in this is that the Chinese belief was that there was a direct connection between heavenly bodies and earthly bodies. And the connection and the position of the sun, moon, and stars led to a lot of what was important to do or not do, what to avoid on any particular time during the year. Now, that was originally very proprietary knowledge. This was for the emperor alone. But of course, China being China, information sort of seeps out, and it became a vernacular document over time. And a little bit of history with that. You know, one of the things that I like about the almanac over this period is that it is one of the few documents that have really united Chinese people, not just in the country, but in the whole diaspora. And no matter where you are, if you were there in that generation of connection to you to the country, you look every Chinese New Year to determine what the year will bring and what to prepare yourself for. On the other hand, another great thing about the almanac, I think, is that it is one of the only documents I ever know that has been basically condemned and criticized by both Christian missionaries and the Communist Party. It is feudal superstition. It is, in a way, a religion, or is it? You know, and that's something that we've talked about for a while. What exactly is it? Is it a scientific document? Is it a self-help guide? Is it a civic document? Is it connected to society? And the question is yes, all of the above, because back then there was no breakdown between astronomy and astrology, or between science and it was all part of the same package. And also, when we look at this, is it a vernacular document? Is it a classical document? Well, those don't apply either. We've done a lot of work with Confucius, for example, and Confucius, I think, in terms of the fundamental state belief system, you would say that is quintessentially Chinese, and that it may not be logical if you define that by the Western thinking from Greece, but it is definitely practical. It's definitely about earthly activities, earthly beliefs, earthly relationships, particularly with family and how society is divided. But also, it was very much connected to the almanac. I mean, the Confucian Academy, the studies began. They would determine when you start studies by checking the almanac. What's a good day? And so, and the idea of this was very rooted in the belief system that the universe was connected in some way, and everything was there connected, and there would be waves of the universe, and the idea was not to go against them, but to find out which way the world was going, and basically surf those waves in terms of how would you define?
When the wave hits, just go with it.
Yes, yeah, or not to fight
When
it.
things rise with it. When things fall, just prepare.
Now, also the thing about the almanac is that I should say divination. Divination actually predated language in China. I mean, they were trying to predict the waves of the universe even before there was a written language, and the written language actually derived from a lot of those etchings that the oracle wrote on the tortoise bone.
I mean, those of you who, I hope you know, and if you don't, quickly to tell you, oracle bones was supposedly the first Chinese language. But oracle bones was the way when they were actually sticking hot rod into a turtle bone to see how it cracks.
Well, the shell,
Oh,
actually.
the shell, yeah, to see how it cracks. And from there, they try to divine the future. And that was the beginning of trying to do fortune telling.
Now, this goes back basically to 2500 BC. And it's credited, like a lot of things, like traditional Chinese medicine, also credited to the Yellow Emperor, who apparently had a lot on his plate at that point. And
of course, Yellow Emperor is a dragon.
yes, yes. And the almanac, though, as we kind of know it, came out of the imperial calendar. The imperial calendar was about 500 BC. The almanac sort of came into being around the Tang Dynasty. In fact, the oldest almanac that we see that we would recognize today as an almanac is in the British Library from 877 AD. And within a few years, they actually developed the whole red and black thing that would really look like today's almanac. Now, where you go from there into the published document, into the Tongxing as we know, the Chinese Almanac is not just the predictions. That's what everybody buys it for every year, but it's also a repository of knowledge and all many different articles like the Farmer's Almanac here that are repeated or sometimes tailored for the year. But it comes out talking about a lot of general knowledge that goes on. And for the publishers of this, it became this year, what do we value of our tradition and what do we put in? And that would change a lot over time, particularly during the period, by the time you get to the Qing dynasty, and there was a lot of interaction between, particularly in the South, Chinese people there and traders and foreigners who would come in. They would talk a lot about, oh, how do we act around foreigners and what do we need to know about them? So that all of this stuff was included and still actually continues into the almanac today. There's still a guide that's, I don't even know how old it is, of phonetically how to speak simple phrases in English.
For example, very simple. They have to teach people to speak 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 1, and they just say 1 in China, in Cantonese, which literally means warm. 1. 2 is very, very simple. They actually call it 2, as in to spit. But it doesn't matter. The whole point is to make sure that people can somehow simulate, simply by alliteration, Chinese style, to speak English. And that's actually how people learned a long, long time ago. I'm saying 100 years ago. As a popular, very easily accessible book.
Now, yeah, and we're talking about now where it really parts ways with the imperial calendar, because at that point, the Tongxing was its own entity. And it had its own articles, and it was just an annual digest basically, and it was in homes where maybe not everyone could read. One person, usually the elder, would be able to read what was in the book, and they would have illustrations that if you didn't know, you could at least look at the picture of the cow and the cow herd and understand, is it going to be a good year or a bad year? Well, does the cow herd have shoes on? Where is the cow based, in the picture?
Is the cow is the cow herd
On the left or right?
Left or right?
Yeah. And all of that would symbolize something. And the thing is that the imperial calendar would not bother with anything like this. And you could tell if a document was a pirate copy, also something I love, because the history of mass publishing in China was also the history of mass piracy in China, since this was for 1,000 years an illegal document that the government was chasing down. And when the actual government sort of published their own calendar, and they put, the saying copying punishable by dismemberment and beheading, the pirate copies would, of course, publish that right in their own pirate copy. If anyone was around China during the glory days of pirate DVDs, you know exactly what I mean. Every pirate copy had the FBI warning in it. And so this really developed into a really beloved and necessary part of each family. And particularly, in Hong Kong and Taiwan, it continues today. It's a little bit trickier in China.
But very much in New York City,
Yeah.
Amsterdam, London. Every
Chinatown that you go to in the world will have their almanacs out this week for sure. So this leads to, how did this all get to MOCA? And it was really interesting because when this facility opened here, there was Big-
That was in October 2009. Thank you.
Yes, yes. There was a question of what do we do with tradition, and how do we haul that to the modern age, and what kind of iconography do we use, uh, and they were, okay, frankly, looking for something to give to donors at the gala, and they thought, okay, this would be great. So let's do something to put, at each table setting. And there's a sort of a movement aesthetically in Hong Kong that does this kind of thing, that takes these bits of Hong Kong history and repurposes them in sometimes very ironic ways. So one of the things that we were sort of snarkily talking about, well, what happens, if you take the big red book and you turn it into a little red book? And all of a sudden, there was this sort of hush around the table. And said, that's exactly right. So Joanna got on the phone to a publisher in Hong Kong. This publisher, in fact, Hong King Tong, which is probably the most popular edition that we've seen around the world, and basically asked him, well, there's a museum that's interested.
I said, hello, I'm just making a cold call. There is this Museum of Chinese in America. They are having a new wonderful space, and we hope that we can have the right to translate your almanac for this year, because it would be a great gala gift. He stopped. He said, why are you calling me?
Well, first of all, it was a museum. A museum is interested in what we do.
Why are you calling me? Where do you live? I drive right to you now.
And the second was, you want to pay for content? Because we were going to really license the contract. No one has ever paid. They just steal it. And so of course, he wanted to find out just who we were. And our first copy really of the almanac really did use the artwork straight. It was just a shrunken down copy of the Kong King Tong edition with a great piece of art that could have been Guan Yin. It could have been the Virgin Mary.
Virgin Mary.
It could have been, with the baby, I should say. Could have been, Venus and Cupid. It was just one of those universal ideas that and icons that transmit through cultures, which was exactly the kind of thing that we were interested in. The next year, someone from the museum, before Neil, someone from the museum called us and said, so where's our book? I said, well, what do you mean? It changes every year. Yeah, where's our book? And after spending about, I don't know, maybe 6 weeks to 2 months doing the first one, we had to whip the second one up in basically 3 weeks. And we could, because the work had been done. So we just talked to our geomancer again. We got this year's predictions. We plugged them in. But then we decided, well, we can't really just use Kong King Tong art from now on, because we want to make something that is actually representative of America, of MOCA, of this kind of diasporic relationship. And so we sort of developed our own branding, and from that year, we started searching for folk art to put on the cover, rather than the kind of stuff that Kong King Tong does generally. We decided, well, there's a lot of stuff that's very, very publishing friendly. And a lot of the art has been from wood block prints to paper cuts. A lot of it is very reproducible. So we decided right out to start searching. And we also had a very, very fine contact in Beijing who was very connected to the history of all the art around New Year. She had actually published an 11-volume collection of Chinese New Year art from several hundred years of history. But I'll show you some of what we were talking about here. Up here, and Joanna can talk a little bit about exactly what kind of stuff we did those days.
We wanted to collect, and we believe that there's so much Chinese art that should be recorded and put in and be understood in a modern context. And so this was one of the artworks, a woodblock print from Mr. Tai from our 3rd edition. And what is so amazing is that he is a seventh generation of his family in doing this, despite having been stopped during the Cultural Revolution, wood blocks being destroyed, and they reconstructed them. And that was during a time it was so important to recognize Chinese folk artists.
And we worked through several copies, very different styles. We were also affiliated with the museum, and our previous dragon was actually from a piece that had barely survived the Cultural Revolution, and
did not have, and we still could not acknowledge the folk artists simply because that dragon from 12 years ago
yeah,
was made by some collective group during the Cultural Revolution, but it was a beautiful, multicolored textile dragon. Oh, Ken is so good.
if you can actually see.
No,
what
we'll put them all out here so that you can have a go.
Yeah, they're all here. And so we worked with several different kinds of, well, we wanted to focus on different regions, different styles of art, mostly connected to New Year traditions. And unfortunately, our main contact there, Mrs. Wong, passed away in 2015.
Madame Wong passed away in 2015.
Yeah. And from there on, we took a very different approach, and really started focusing on, since this was supposed to be about the diasporic relationship, let's really focus on the diaspora and go and in search of artists who are working in this tradition around the world. And so in our series here, we've had artists from Macau, we've had artists from Canada.
We love the Macau one. We were in Portugal one day and we said, wait, that's the year of the chicken. The chicken has to do with Portugal, which can be related to Macau because that's part of that diaspora. And so we said, let's try and find a Macau artist. And then that Mr. Chow,
Yeah,
he was fantastic.
and this was basically a comic strip artist, graphic novelist, who is in a way sort of the modern tradition of that. And so we went through several of these kind of things. We have an electronic illustrator who did, I mean, basically he does only digital stuff, who did a cover from Canada, basically about taking the theatrical, two faces, happy face, sad face of theater, but making them in Chinese opera characters. And we have a Taiwan artist collective. Again, one of our favorites was from the U.S. from Cam Mack, who's a very famous Hong Kong-born artist.
MOCA knows Cam Mack
Grew up
well.
here, and this is an adorable chubby baby that I think, can we say that this was a rejected postage stamp?
Whatever you want to say.
Okay, maybe. Okay, we won't say that. We won't say that. But this is an artist who had done the Lunar New Year postage stamp series, and he very much gave us this art. Last year we had a Singapore sketch artist who did streetscapes and gave us a Chinese New Year streetscape from Singapore, which was also quite delightful. And this year we have
Saki, you can do it later.
And this year we celebrated the very strong Cantonese presence in England, and so we still have to figure out where we go next. But this is currently our
Don't
our
worry,
diaspora.
the world is a big place. I'm sure we can find good Asian artists, and that's the wonderful part of it. We haven't run out of ideas yet.
Really, the interesting thing about the content of this has been, how do you deal with a really ancient tradition and haul that into the modern age? And also, how do you deal with something that is predominantly agrarian, if you look at these, and bring it into an urban society? And so you'll have a lot of things that, taken literally, mean nothing to us today. I mean, how many of us are actually going to be out on the water fishing?
Rearing cattle,
Oh, okay, there are, but not in New York. You won't get that.
digging ditches.
Building toilets. You don't get that in
No, somebody else built the toilet.
Yes, those are specialized activities. But there are certain things, when you break it down, that yes, they are to an extent glorified weather predictions. I mean, they're saying it's going to be a sunny day, so a good day for a wedding, a good day to be out in the fields planting, or if it's a rainy day, well, it's a good day to stay home and repair your fishing nets. Don't go out on the water. And people look at this, and it's almost a parlor trick, a parlor game in families to give a modern spin on this. If you're sitting around in Hong Kong, what does it mean to don't buy livestock? Well, okay, no cats, no dogs, no, okay, and so you spin it very differently. Sometimes they take it very literally, because a good day for a haircut, which used to be about the
Good day
baby's
for haircut for your baby
the baby's first haircut,
first time.
is not how it's interpreted in the modern day. Also, a good day to break ground. Well, that is sort of the same. Architects actually will, in Hong Kong in particular, you will see construction sites opening at exactly almost to the hour at the same time around town, because the almanac says it was a good day to break ground.
Which means it's a very bad day for traffic.
And also, the things that they focus on are beginnings and endings. As we said, baby's first haircut, opening the classes to start studies at the academy, but also weddings and funerals. And weddings, there is an entire industry built around the almanac approach to scheduling a wedding. Not just the wedding itself, but when do the in-laws meet? When do gifts get exchanged? How much time do you fit into this? When do you deal with the house? How do you deal with the house, particularly with multi-generational families? And so all of this is encoded in the almanac, and that if you go back in the tradition, you understand it's a very different meaning than it is on its face today. Right from our second year, when we started doing our own version, we decided to actually have the decoded terms, and so explaining where they came from and what they mean.
I think one of the best modern interpretation was building fishing nets. We don't fish. Well, how many of you really fish? Oh my, none. So what is a modern interpretation of building fishing nets?
Well, repairing fishing nets,
Or
basically.
repairing, yeah.
And that is a day that you're not going to be out on the water, and so you spend your time at home fixing everything so that you'll be prepared when the weather is good and you can go back out. And that is basically, the day that you deal with your cloud backup and all of the things that you deal with at home. And so this is very much the type of thing that people sort of go through and they talk about, or internalize and read in a very different way. Even when it doesn't involve direct actual weather, it really gives a sort of meaning and structure and balance to the way that you do your life. I could do this anytime, but the almanac says do it tomorrow, so I'll do it tomorrow, or I'll do it today, or I won't worry about it, for another week, because other things are more important. And that way, it does sort of get it a sense of finding a wave of the universe, as we say, and the fact that, okay, it's good, it's good, it's good, it's good, it's bad. And so if you've ever been gambling with Chinese people, you know exactly what that is. I've been to baccarat tables where they okay, banker, 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 banker. Oh, no, no, no. And they predict exactly when the wave is going to turn. And it's very much, you know, hardwired into a way of thinking that I don't think sometimes it's even conscious. They just see when the wave of the universe is going to change.
I think I now have to do my reveal for this year.
I think we're ready. Oh,
So-
actually, I one more thing before we get to the reveal. I think the ultimate honor is that when Kong King Tong, the edition that we did, they worked with and borrowed, and basically went from this to this. This year, they put out their version.
I think that is the ultimate honor that we feel, that when we cold called them in 2009, and we still are in good friendship, to realize that, hey, they actually thought it was a good idea. And it's good because I think this, I remember the publisher told me, this is not a business to get into to make money, because it is a sharing so that you build your community. And by building the community, you have better understanding. And with better understanding, we will have peace. Well, we hope.
Now, okay, so I think we do have some photos to show. One of the things that we've been answering a lot of questions is people are asking us specifically about weddings. What is a good day to get married? How do we deal with that? Because we don't really give a lot of between the lines advice on this. We just print the document, and the geomancers themselves, you know, take on personal clients for this kind of thing. So the thing is that we've talked a lot about weddings in the past 10 years now. Joanna found some photos, or at least her mother did, about the beginning of the academy. So we have to show you exactly what it meant by starting studies in Chinese tradition.
Sometime a few months ago, my mother just sent me 3 scans that floored me. And we will make sure that all of you see it. In the scan, this is the first photo. Groups of men you can share it around. And a little baby boy in the middle. And the guy who is at the top left corner is my grandpa. And my mother couldn't even tell me where she found it. She said, found it, scanned it, send you. Which is typical of my mother. But then I realized what it was. My grandfather was the scholar who actually was doing a starting studies ritual, a very, very important Confucian ritual for any kid whose family could afford, because that would actually involve, I mean, a roast pig and all that. And it would involve, therefore, the older gentleman holding the hand of the young kid, and then just helping him write very simply, 1 or 2 words. And then of the 3 scans, 2 of them come with my grandfather's notes. That was from 1949, or what he said would be national uh, Republic of China National Year 37. 37? Yeah, that would have been, well, 1949. And so that apparently was what he did. And it was very clearly that during that time, he was doing it for a patron of the school that my grandfather was the head of, which I also completely forgot. I was so bad, a granddaughter. He was the head of the Confucian Academy of Macau of that time. And they had to have an entire ritual before, and then everybody went along with the roast pig. That was starting studies. We should do that more often. And so I promised my mother that this time for this year's almanac, it will be included.
Okay, now your filial duty is finished.
I have now done my filial duty. Thank you.
So now, to get to what the year has to offer, or at least what our geomancer says, basically how he deals with this is that the way that any of us would get a horoscope given, it basically you get the exact time that you were born, and you figure out the week, day, month, and hour of your birth, and get the heavenly stems and earthly stems that align there. You do the same thing, or our geomancer does the same thing for the year. And when does the year begin? And he gives the horoscope for the year. And it's not actually on New Year's, which you would expect. It starts with spring comes, which is a little bit before, which was the 4th, I believe,
Yeah,
right?
Feb 4th this year. And those of you who might have read the January 2nd story in the Times, probably you don't want to hear it again, because I was quoted just one adjective: tumultuous. I'm sorry about that. But that did actually create our second printing. We completely ran out of our books.
The 2 years ago, our geomancer was saying that he just was saying the 7 killings are in ascendance. And we said, what are you talking about? The 7 killings? Well, it means that the petty people will begin to try to take over the world, and will be up for the just and righteous people to stand up against them. The Ukraine invasion happened about 2 weeks later. And so right away, that got attention at the Times. And basically last year, there was some, well, he said basically it's not nearly as bad as it was before. It's looking up, it's looking up. And this year he said basically, no, we're back where we were in 2022.
We have one friend who have refused to turn up to our talks because if it's bleak, she won't turn up. And so we told her not to come. But I don't think it's about bleak or not bleak. It's about being prepared or not. It's being mentally prepared or not.
What did he say? You want to go through some of the things that Warwick had said?
Well, read the read the New York Times. Um, well, there is an appearance of peace, but they are emptiness. I'm sorry, maybe I'm being very philosophical, but I think it's better to know than not to know. Finan- Suddenly get caught. Financial resources are scarce. Life's journey are full of bumps and collisions. There are great ambitions, but a lot of one-sided thinking. Things are difficult to predict.
You want to talk about the stems that came up this year?
There's something interesting when we talk about stems. No, there's always the yin and yang. The year of the dragon stems as he predicted with the birth of that year. It's all yang stems, no yin at all, no water, nothing that balances. It's all same fiery, masculine, bullish energy.
As we were talking with James Barron, trying to explain that, he said, well, it's basically all men at the table, they're all talking, and no one is listening. And that is basically the sign of this year. Is that it, or do you want to continue more? There's a lot more.
My tears off.
Okay. Well, the interesting thing though is that when you deal with something like this, and something that, and we did an event in Hong Kong several years ago, and it was the first time we'd ever been with our geomancer in public. One of the questions that came up was, is this year a good year or a bad year? And he seemed befuddled and said, good and bad for what? Because the thing about the almanac is that there is always a balance of something. And no matter how big the bad column is, there is almost always something in the good column. And the idea is to learn really how to maximize that and to work with that in a way that also downplays the bad. And that's one of the things that part of the New Year ritual every year in families is to go through that, and not on a macro level and a micro level. People get their own fortunes told, but they also look at the year to say, well, what does this portray, and is this going to be, as we said, a bad year for finances? Well, it's nice to know that in advance, so that you don't go out and buy that car. You figure out how to really negotiate these things, and what to protect, and when to advance. And so whether or not that is entirely true, because ultimately, when you get right down to it, these predictions that everyone is using from around the world are glorified weather predictions from Hong Kong. It is still a unifying factor that people think, is this, what will the year portend, and how do I negotiate this, and what's my personal strategy for dealing with this? And everyone there basically answers that question in their own way.
It's going to be very interesting, but he always reminds me, be good to community, be good to friends, take care of family. on the point of taking care of family, a little gift.
Oh, yeah.
We have been asked by a little dragon lady,
You might want to change the wording of that.
a a wonderful friend who was 24, known as a dragon, because she was born in the year of the dragon 24 years ago. And the thing is, all of us think that if it's your year, it's your luck. It's actually not true. It's exactly the opposite. And so we need some sort of talisman, something to protect you. So I was on my way to Hong Kong, ran to the most famous temple.
It happens to be across the street from our apartment. But it was your first time in, wasn't it?
Yeah, I know. It's been 13 years since we moved there. I never went into that temple, but I said, for my dragon friend, I must. So I ran in, and we're talking about incense smoke, like, I don't know, first class fire. And I ran in, and it smelled like, wow. I mean, anybody could be knocked out. And I had to go and talk to the monastery ladies or whatever. Yes, please go present it to her. I mean, that's another thing about community, family, is that, you wanted to make sure everybody's safe. And I think for this year, it's also important. Make sure people around you are safe. And I do apologize that I sound like this. I don't normally sound like this. I was struck by this amazing stomach flu. And another friend, unbeknownst to me, had something similar. She's in the hospital. So I'm just very lucky I'm here. I have a wonderful husband. And all of you are here to hear us. This is like the amazing sold out show we've ever had. So thank you.
So do we have any time for questions? Okay, let's have it. If there's any questions in the audience.
I still want to say my statement.
Sorry.
Thank you, MOCA. Without MOCA, there wouldn't be this Pocket Almanac, which then became something that is not our profession, which we now turn into kind of professionals.
I think it all goes back to family, as you were saying.
Yeah, it's family and trusting friends.
So, any yes question? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, the good, there is, in terms of the world, for example, they were talking about a very bad economic year. It will be very difficult to make money. Not that it can't be done, but it just is more difficult. And I think a lot of us can see this, post-pandemic. It's just more difficult to do the remedial basic stuff that we used to be able to do. And so on the other hand, there are other opportunities that come up. And one of the things that he mentioned was that the world is in flux and the people are in flux. And a lot of that was in terms of migration and crossing borders. and the idea that yes, it will be a difficult economy here, but a large part of the strength of the economy comes from people who move from one place to another. And the people who get the extra people actually turn out to be in a much better state. And I think we've seen some of that in the US, or at least we're starting to. We've certainly seen that in England because of certain, the level of Chinese migrants into England are kind of off the charts in terms of abilities and finances and competence.
And also the number of Americans in Europe now. We are amazed every time now to see not, well, we don't call them immigrants, but
Digital nomads, basically.
yeah, digital nomads who are spreading around the world, which is good. It gives us opportunity. Another thing that he did say, which is, I guess, positive, is taking care of mental health. That is very important. And he said, spend more time meditating.
Yeah, in a spiritual realm, that's sort of like, repairing fishing nets. We have a time now to really take care of ourselves. And it's different from it was in the pandemic. That was definitely a time to repair fishing nets. Now it takes a different type of self-awareness and self-care.
It's preparing for better fishing nets, which is different from 3 years ago.
Any other questions? Yes. Uh-oh. Yeah, I don't know. In terms of negotiation, I'm not sure that works.
You are not going to Mars.
Well, it's not breaking new ground. I mean, I think our sense of distance is a little bit different now. So, oh, I don't know, but
Not Mars.
but I think just be prepared.
You see, I just flew in from Hong Kong, so long journey, short journey.
Longer than it used to be back when we had Russian airspace. It was
Yeah,
really
that's the
quite
thing.
crypt.
Russian airspace.
Yeah. Now it's a 2 extra hours just to go around there. But any other questions? Oh, yes.
It's for like the what your they couldn't hear the questions.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, we selected this basically when we worked with Kong King Tong. They have a geomancer who is one of Hong Kong's most established figures, or was. And he passed away midway, and the family, he was a little bit difficult to work with. The family was incredibly difficult to work with. And our publisher said basically,
And then the daughter took over.
yes, as we were saying, the family was difficult to work with. And our publisher said, it's enough that I deal with them. You don't need to. Really, you don't need to. And he introduced us to a friend of his who learned this whole project. And we talk about Warwick in the book. He was an architect and an engineer who later in life taught himself how to do the divination, because it is an incredibly complicated algorithm. And it relies actually knowing traditional Chinese math, which is not at all like modern math. And so he taught himself the family tradition. He was a 3rd generation geomancer, and went to school basically. His grandfather put him through college by telling fortunes in Hong Kong. And everyone basically in that world uses the same data. They sometimes vary a little bit in terms of the prediction of what's good and bad and when the day would start, but there's a remarkable similarity. among the different editions of the almanac. And the interesting thing is that our geomancer said if there are changes, it's usually editorial. It's usually the publisher saying, "Oh, there's not enough space in that line. We'll cut that out, or we'll move this. We'll play with that." And so generally, the differences are omissions from one to the next, rather than actually different readings.
Just in addition, Warwick Wong was one of those architects that built the MTR of Hong Kong, the metro. So he's a very well educated, Western educated architect. And then in his retirement, he wanted to go back to his roots. And I think that is another wonderful story of a person who went back to family and family roots.
I should say that yes, it's an ancient craft, but he gives us his information on a spreadsheet. So we've got our Excel file already. Any other questions?
Actually, we have some questions online, like from our
okay.
virtual audience. Yes. So the first question is, how does this relate to the 紫微斗数? Like 紫微斗数, it's like it isn't maybe another kind of almanac. Yeah. It's called 紫微斗数. Yeah. 紫微斗数. I'm trying to understand it, but maybe I can share this question with you afterwards. Yeah. And then another question is about like specific predictions based on our signs. That in terms of how to find out about sort of those predictions.
And if you're talking about the Chinese animal zodiac signs, yes, we can say that there are 12 general groups, and some groups have better luck than others, such as the dragon that needs a little bit of extra protection this year.
Yeah, I think the best way to describe that is that when it's your year, the good is accentuated, but also the bad is accentuated too. So you need to be able to protect yourself against the bad and actually keep the good open and free.
And someone's asking, so being a water dragon, how affected I am by the wood dragon year?
Okay, one of my favorite lines from Amy Tan from Joy Luck Club, I believe it was, I'm a water dragon, my mother's a fire dragon, together we make fog. And so one of the situations that is interesting for the wood dragon year is that wood is very homey and very, comforting. And when people talk about wood, they sometimes it stretches into the construction industry. In fact, people who build things, but it's also very vulnerable to fire. So you really want to stay away from fire, and water is not great, but you do need it to balance the fire. So you want everything in there in balance and not no one element really taking over.
And we have a water dragon here who will be able to tell you, how it goes.
And another audience is asking, what is the talisman for the year? The talisman? Yeah.
The what? Ah. What was it? The one that goes. I know. I didn't open it either. Right. So the talisman to protect the dragon is actually the rat. So our friend Eva will be having this nice little ring, little tie with a rat.
Any rats in your family? Perfect.
Mom, perfect.
So so as I mentioned, the first question, they kind of about the 紫微斗数, they actually refers, yeah, it's called the purple star astrology. All right, okay, I guess, we'll find, no problems. Yeah, we'll find out more about this. So I think, yeah, that's all. So great.
Well, thank you for joining us this evening. We appreciate, first of all, coming out for the first time in 4 years. So it's great to see you.
And thank you, Zaki.
Yeah, once again, thank you so much, yeah, for coming. I mean, once we will definitely, come to our more programs. Of course, next year, right, the year of the snake, we will definitely have Joanna and Ken again with us. But once again, the museum will remain open until 9 o'clock. So feel free to, stay around, visit our special exhibitions. And thank you so much for coming. Yeah.